start with Geeta Dhyanam. Om. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters from within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers, and the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, now you know a little more about Om Tat Sat.
Yeah.
You weren't here with it the last 3 days.
Yeah, I don't know what's that one thing.
You know, we do have it on live. And it is still there on Facebook. And you invested heavily in this, so best not to miss important lessons related to it.
Okay.
Okay? And then you'll know about Om Tat Sat. Okay. So we come into the 18th chapter. We begin the 18th chapter this morning. The 18th chapter is really the entire Gita. What we get with the organization of the Gita, of course, there are the three sixes, which is the Tattvamasi. So the first 6 are about you. So Lord Krishna speaks with you about your nature and how to begin to reveal it, and then speaks about that, which is the absolute, the highest Purusha, teaches about, and then the union between the two, that thou art, you are that. So there's that, and then there's another way of looking at it, which is, there's so many. There's one like this, which is, if we look at the Gita, what we see is, when I was very much in the world, I'm still in the world. The only thing that changed is I took the world out of me. That's the only thing that changed. Because what you call the world, I'm still very much here. You know, I'm actually running for office, not successfully yet, but we'll see how that all works out in the end. I never would have imagined anything like that. To do something I don't get anything for, I never could have imagined something like that. But the way that I learned to sell is like this. And I was known as a very successful salesperson, then successful marketing, successful visionary in business. But it was really very simple stuff. And of course, that was all about I, me, mine. But if you're trying to engage with someone, you have to get their interest up front. And the only way to get their interest is to relate to them. So sometimes you would hear stories about a great salesperson who could sell refrigerators to the Eskimos. And that was, I don't know if you've ever heard that saying before, but I had heard that. I could never figure out how to do that. But I could determine how to relate to someone, and I only had an interest in selling something to someone that they actually had a use for. And so what I found was the requirement up front was to help them to see why they had a use for what it was that I was offering. In this business, spiritual business, which is of course not a business, but in this role, it's easy because we all have a need to be free of suffering, right? And so, but the first step to offering something is to make the connection with the person that you're offering to, which is to help them to see that they have a need. And then second part of it is to briefly share with them how it is that what you have can fill their need. And so, and then now if they're still there and they're interested, then you continue on in more detail. And then, of course, there's the big close. Now you go in for the sale. And you bring them on board as a partner. And if you're actually going to be successful and have a good reputation in sales, then the customer has to be a partner, not someone that you schlep something onto.
Right.
You don't just get their money and run. You have to work with them. You have to be their partner and help them to partner with you. And so, and in business, by the way, that's what makes someone a repeat customer. Because at the end of the day, no one actually does something they don't want to do. The only reason you would advance in spiritual path is you realize you would want to do it. And the only reason you would want to do it is if you genuinely see that it can free you from suffering. Yes? So at the end of the day, there's even a self-centered motivation in selflessness, but it's really just a freeing yourself from the ignorance and seeing what self means. Right? Selfishness is just a denial of truth. It's not in and of itself a problem, because if you knew who you were, then you could freely be selfish and selfless, and they would mean the same. Does that make any sense? Sorry. So in this view, the Gita is organized in exactly this way, because the problem where I would talk with people and I'd have to pick who has the problem that I can solve, and that would be the qualification of the customer. Well, for what Krishna is offering, we're all qualified. So it's universal in this way, because everybody's caught up in suffering, right? So the first two chapters have to do with this. They're the introduction. First, to help us to relate to the suffering, to lay out Arjuna's suffering, his grief, and see ourselves in it. And see how we've done this, and to relate to him. And then Krishna provides the universal solution, which is the first cut at wisdom, which is, wait a second, you're not that body. You're eternal. There's never been a time when you have not been, nor will there ever be a time when you are not, nor me or any of this. Right? And so, and explains the great yoga. Yoga is equanimity of mind. Yoga is skill in action. Yoga is freedom from suffering. So chapter 2 is all about this. And now that we're interested, we keep going. And now we're starting the big close, which is the wrap up to make us a partner with the Lord. And that's what 18 is. So we begin. We're always beginning. So we begin chapter 18. Chapter 18 is called the Yoga of the Wisdom through Renunciation, or Yoga of the Liberation through Renunciation. So again, the topic is renunciation, because the only issue is we're holding on to something that we need not hold on to. Shivadas is so practical, because when we were talking yesterday, that's what it is. There's a holding on to something that you're really wanting to release.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, so it's good that you bring it up,
Right.
Yeah. But that's it for all of us, And so this chapter, again, is an exploration of renunciation at a very poignant level. And that's where it starts. We completed chapter 16, which was the yoga of the divine and demoniacal estates. Chapter 17 was an extension of it. Because Lord Krishna closed chapter 16 by pointing to scripture as the guide for us in coming out of the association with the demoniacal estate inside. He pointed to scripture and he said, do as the scripture says, and that will guide you out of this association with the lower nature. And then Arjuna asked the question at the start of 17, what about if I am not well versed in the scriptures? What then? And that's this discussion of the threefold faith. So 18 starts again with a question. And the question now is, Arjuna said, I desire to know, O mighty armed, O dear Krishna, the essence of truth of renunciation. So teach me about renunciation. Teach me about the essence of it. And also of abandonment. So obviously we're dealing with Sanskrit terms that have been translated, but generally they're translated exactly this way. Renunciation and abandonment, and this will be clarified. So what's the difference between the two, and what's the essence of them? We could say this. We could say renunciation applying to self-centered action, and abandonment related to the fruit of the action. So, and this will be clarified more. Blessed Lord said, here we go. The sages understand samnyasa. Samnyasa is, Swami is called a sannyasin in India, or Baba, or lots of other things, but sannyasin is actually a Sanskrit term that translates best to renunciation. So a renunciate. And people have so many different ideas about what that means. Somebody reached out to me a few days ago and said they want to take sannyas in the Shivananda order. What to do? And I had to respond in the same way that Swami Ramasarup would always respond, which is that inner renunciation or outer renunciation? And he answered truthfully. We'll touch on it. We'll touch on it today. In one way, there's something about Indian society which is related. So outer renunciation being you put on orange cloth, and you teach. That's an idea. You renounce your duties. So now you can leave your wife or husband or leave your family and you can go off and live. And in India, you would be cared for. People will offer you alms and food and all of that. So not by the government, but by society, which cares for the renunciate. Renunciate is revered in India. And inner renunciation is being discussed here again, will be discussed here again. So the sages understand sannyasa to be renunciation of desire-motivated action, and the wise declare the abandonment of the fruits of all action as tyaga. Tyaga is the term that's being translated to abandonment. So sannyasa or samnyasa to renunciation, and tyaga, abandonment. Here's Swamiji's commentary. He says, at the close of chapter 16, Krishna had emphasized the importance of following scriptural injunctions. The next chapter answered Arjuna's question, if one did not know the scriptural injunctions, but was endowed with faith, what happens to him? And now in this chapter, Arjuna asks the other question. If one knew the scriptures, the scriptures emphasize the need for renunciation. In every tradition. So Jesus talks about in Sermon on the Mount. He talks about the one with money, the rich man. Can he go to the kingdom of heaven? The answer will be no. And what's the there's an allegory about the camel and the needle. What is that? Who remembers that allegory? Okay, I'll look it up on Google and we'll come back to that tomorrow.
It's easier
for
a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
To enter the kingdom of heaven. That's it. That's
However,
it.
There is Aramaic scholars who there's the same word in Aramaic for camel as the word rope. So some would argue that it's easier for a rope to go through the big rope than a camel. So it's Aramaic language.
Okay,
but
interesting.
whatever.
Interesting. Oh.
You get the idea.
Okay, there's the quote. There's the quote. Thank you. But he's saying that a rich man can't go to heaven. It's an interesting concept. So in that way, then, if the goal is to go to heaven, what are you hearing from Jesus' teachings?
You have to give rather than hoard.
You have to renounce it.
Renounce it.
Yeah. So the concept of renunciation is actually in every tradition. The Buddha says in the Four Noble Truths, first one is there's suffering. The cause of suffering is craving, desire, craving. And that it's possible to be free of suffering, and the way to be free of suffering is what?
Lack of desires.
To renounce the craving, to renounce the desires, right? So in every tradition we'll get, and in the Vedic tradition and the yoga tradition, it's clear. We've been here before already in this. And we see that we're involved in a letting go, not a positive acquisition of something, yes? Yeah. We come to see, and no doubt you've seen it by now, that peace is inside. Correct, Hari?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bliss is inside, yes?
Yeah.
Everything's inside, it's not outside. Now that doesn't mean that it's not outside. It means it's inside the outside. We have to talk very specifically with you about this. It's inside the outside. Actually, there's neither inside nor outside. There's just truth. There's only God. But where do you find God? You find God outside of you by going inside what's outside. And this, well, you have to do this because you have to cover everything with the Lord. You've developed a very particular view, which is God is only inside me, but therefore not inside you. And I'm afraid of you because of what you might say. But it's only God in front of you too. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So, but God is inside. Commonly misconstrued to mean only inside me. But that's not true. Inside you and inside her and inside me and inside him and inside that drum and inside this microphone is you. I. And how to get there. This is where we're going right now, but how to get there. You have an idea that that's not so, correct? Mm-hmm. So what do you have to do? You know the answer. What do you have to do? You have an idea that that's not so. So what do you have to do?
You change the idea.
You have to let go of that idea. You have to renounce it. You have a feeling of being separate. What do you have to do?
Renounce.
Renounce it. Renounce the feeling. Yeah? So every tradition is saying the highest is achieved through renunciation alone. And even the attainment of knowledge is limited knowledge to support us finally letting go of all that's unreal. Our dear sister Raina, do we know Raina? Raina is now in Hawaii. And Raina joins us, so she'll be with us this morning. I think you've met her. So Swami used to also struggle with the association between name and form. It's gotten better. It's still not. You can say a name and it won't necessarily. But Raina is dear to us. She's been here a number of times. Now she lives in Hawaii. So we're talking about spiritual path and where she is in the path. And so Swami says, and she's very close to Peace Pilgram and really relates to Peace Pilgram. And it's Peace Pilgram that brought us together, brought me into her life and vice versa. And so she's needing to take that next step. And so we talked yesterday and said there was some guidance that came. And remember what Peace Pilgram said when she surrendered. She said, I give you all of me, I withhold nothing. Does that sound like renunciation? Mm-hmm. I give you all of me, I withhold nothing. And then after that, she describes that she was on a hill in the night and she walked and was given guidance that night. And she followed it and continued to follow it. And then 20 years later, she started the pilgrimage. 27 years later, something like that, she started the pilgrimage. 15 years. So I shared that. And Raina says, what most of us would experience, even if we don't say it. Well, I have to hold something for me. I'm afraid to say, I withhold nothing. Yeah, that's a beautiful smile, Harry. You see it. I'm afraid to say I withhold nothing. So she's also talking about renunciation, right? Okay.
Well, I would think I'm the same focus doing my art. Like I couldn't renounce my tools.
Yeah. Well, and that's an idea of renunciation. That's an idea of renunciation, and that's being explored here. It's just an idea of renunciation. Your tools were never yours to begin with, for God's sakes. How can you renounce something that's not yours? No, I'm serious. How can you renounce something that's not yours?
You could probably surprise yourself with something how beautiful you could make with just your bare hands anyway.
Done that.
How do you renounce something that's not yours? What is yours? Are your hands yours?
No.
No. Were the tools yours?
I guess not.
Right?
Yeah.
This ashram, this beautiful house, this beautiful shala we live in and care for and serve in, how could we renounce it?
Yeah.
Your wife, your husband, your child, how could you renounce her?
Oh my gosh.
Right?
It's just a given.
The only thing that's yours is the ignorance that you hold on to.
Yeah.
That helps with attachment.
Ego. That's all that's yours. You've never had anything else.
Right.
And you hold on to it. And that's what Raina, and she's ready to let go. So we encourage her. She's ready to let go and step into the abyss. And so we always encourage this. Because the one thing you hold on to is the one thing you don't want. I remember, oh my God, and you're smiling and some are laughing, so that's pretty cool. I remember our dear Swami Premananda, one day he's talking about ownership and how can you own something, and he's telling him a story. He has a pen and he's talking about the relationship with the pen, and he says, "This is my pen, I give it to you." And he's just cracking up laughing while he's saying it. And I'm cracking up laughing, and I'm looking around and no one else is laughing. But you see, it's funny. This is not your body.
The earth body.
So Swamiji here even says, the scriptures emphasize the need for renunciation or tyaga. Without tyaga, there can be no self-realization. So, quotes, renunciation meant abandonment of all that was considered worldly. This is the idea of renunciation. Only a few could do this. They rose in public esteem, and this was India that he's talking about. They rose in public esteem and endeavored to preserve it by perpetuating an error. The more spectacular and beyond the reach of the common man, they made this tyaga, this renunciation. So I can renounce this, I can renounce that. The surer were they of their own position of prestige and power. In India, the renunciate is revered. So the one that lets go of absolutely everything, lets go of family, and lets go of their wealth, whatever they had, and lets go of their position, whatever they had, and their responsibilities in the world, whatever they had, that person is seen as the pinnacle of spiritual attainment. And so they get worshipped. They get offered food and all of this. The surer they were of their own position of prestige and power. This is why when the beautiful soul asked me about I'd like to take renunciation, I'd like to take sannyas, and the question is that outer or inner, he knows, and he even said it at the end of his answer. He said, well, inner, except I also like the idea of being taken care of. So you see the motive in that?
I was just what is it? That can be transmuted in the process. I imagine that gets purified, even though it starts with a motive.
Well, Swami Premananda spoke to that as well. He called them fake swamis, but he said, still, it's okay because even the fake swamis, after a while, there will be some purification. But the renunciation is inner, just as a lead into this. The renunciation is an inner renunciation, which really means, and here, Swamiji said he perpetuates an error, and I was laughing about this morning. It's conveniently ignored that one should renounce only what is one's own, which is the false ego and vanity, prestige and possession, and that renouncing what does not belong to you in the first place, such as home, property, and wealth, is meaningless. Okay, so we enter the discussion about renunciation then. He says, of course, the position corrupted their heart, and renunciation was a mockery, even by their own theoretical standards. But they had enough hold on society by now to make any renunciation unnecessary. We find this in all holy orders, whatever be the religion. So the Catholic tradition, for example, you would see this idea of renunciation all through it. You go to Rome, you go to the Vatican, you'll see it. And then the idea we have nothing, but don't take this away. And in India, there's a good percentage of the monasteries and such, the ashrams and such, where this is also perpetuated. So in the world, you'll see everything. So And this is shared because it's wanted that we understand what renunciation actually means. It doesn't mean renouncing your tools.
Yes, right.
It doesn't mean renouncing your wife or husband.
Right.
Certainly, the idea that something is yours has to be dealt with. And even after seeing that nothing is ours, how persistent is the idea that it is? Yes?
When I think of that, I think of Fiorella.
Yes,
And then,
beautiful.
So that, then that makes me realize, there's attachment because of fear kicks in.
Yes.
And so I try to come to this teaching exactly, thinking, okay, well, she just was born through me. She has her own path and helps me to dissipate that every time I think of death.
Yes.
Because I feel like nothing else holds me. I don't really have fears any other than Fiorella.
Yeah. And really, she is God. She is both child of God. She's not my child. She's child of God. And she is God. And she and I are one. I just have to look deeply to see it. Whatever I do for her, I receive. Yeah. So there, we're touching on renunciation. Okay, we come back to it in the morning. That's enough for this morning, the introduction to let's read this last paragraph. Lord Krishna opens the door wider so that all may enter the realm of renunciation. The Swami engaged in self-will, desire-prompted action is no better than a business executive, except that the latter is more honest. The layman who performs the most prosaic task without egoism or selfish desire qualifies for self-realization. If he engages himself in the selfless service of humanity, but has not a single thought for the fruits of such service, he is a man of Tyaga. He's one of Tyaga, or real renunciation. The structures of the world are nonsensical. The structures of the world don't make any sense. This mind is so objectified that it wants to see something outside that it can follow, which will lead it to happiness. And so, but in every structure in the world, in every organization, we see the same. But also we see the saint, just meaning the one who's free of the taint of this feeling of being separate and the need to self-propagate, the need to do for myself ahead of others. We see it in all of the spiritual traditions, all the religious organizations, all the worldly organizations. We see that, but then we'll also see the one who's moving the other direction, right? The one who's letting go of that. The one who's not doing for themselves, not wanting the fruit of action, but are offering it. And so as we enter this discussion, and that's related to the real renunciation, which is inner, not outer. The outer renunciation won't get you a thing. Marrying someone won't get you a darn thing. Divorcing someone won't get you a darn thing. Having a child won't give you anything. This was the discussion yesterday, some as well, during the Upanishad. Having a child won't give you something. If you do it in order to get something, you won't get it. And not having the child, and there's a particular craziness where then people give away the child because I didn't get something from it. Oh my God. Right. But that happens in this world too, doesn't it? Yeah. So as we enter this, and really here's our opportunity, and we'll be, I think, maybe 2 weeks with the 18th chapter, something like that. Next couple of weeks. So it's a very good meditation for us, very good opportunities to come to Hari and all of us, what it is that we're holding on to that we have to let go of, and to see it right in front of us, and to resolve and make the commitment and let it go. And say, I withhold nothing, with a clear heart, with a free heart. and step forward into the sunlight. That's where Krishna wants us. He's in the sunlight, in the light of the Lord. Okay, we'll close. Final prayers in RT, page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Orvairukamiva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Orvairukamiva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardhanam Orvairukamiva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyanto Ma Kashit Dukhabhat Bhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mritor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. And below Sakura Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions. Okay, let's stand for Arati.